bronze gates torn from their hinges. Death itself, for the first time in the history of the world, no longer the one holding the keys, but the one from whom the keys are taken. If you could have stood in the unseen place on that middle day, this is the scene the earliest Christians believed you would have witnessed. Not a corpse waiting, a conqueror at work. But here is the strange thing. The Bible barely lets us look. It tells us Jesus died. It tells us he rose. And over the one stretch of time in between, the stretch the whole of Christian faith turns on, it draws a curtain. Where was he? What was he doing? The body lay in a sealed tomb outside the walls of Jerusalem. Yet the New Testament insists in a handful of difficult electric verses that Jesus himself was not simply absent, not simply asleep, that in the interval when God seemed most defeated, the most decisive work in the universe was being carried out, unseen. By the end of this, you will understand why the Church has confessed, for 2,000 years, a line that still stops people cold, that before he rose, he descended. And to find out what he did down there, we have to start with what we actually know, which is more and stranger than most people realize. The year is somewhere near AD 33. I say near deliberately, because the exact year of the crucifixion is genuinely debated among historians. The two strongest candidates are AD 30 and AD 33, both of them Fridays that fall at Passover under the same Roman prefect. That prefect was Pontius Pilate, who governed Judea from AD 26 to 36, a man we do not know only from the Gospels, because in 1961, archaeologists at Caesarea Maritima unearthed a limestone block carved with his name and his title. The emperor in Rome was Tiberius. The high priest in Jerusalem was Joseph Caiaphas, and we have his name too, from an ossuary, a bone box, discovered in Jerusalem in 1990, inscribed Joseph, son of Caiaphas. These are not legendary figures. They left their names in stone. Into that world, on a Friday afternoon, a man is executed outside the city and buried before sundown. The burial matters, so hold on to its details. Jewish custom demanded burial the same day, before the Sabbath began at sunset. A wealthy member of the ruling council named Joseph of Arimathea, a man who, Luke tells us, had not consented to the condemnation, went to Pilate and asked for the body. He laid it in his own new tomb, cut into the soft limestone of the Jerusalem hills, and rolled a heavy stone across the low entrance. A second man, Nicodemus, brought spices, about 75 Roman pounds of myrrh and aloes, John says, something over 30 kilograms. That is not the quantity you bring for a criminal. That is the burial of a king. And here, quietly, a 700-year-old line from Isaiah comes true almost by accident, that the servant would be with a rich man in his death. We even hold physical proof that a crucified man could be buried like this. In 1968, on a hillside just north of Jerusalem, archaeologists found the heel bone of a crucified man named Yehohanan, still pierced by the iron nail, bent against a knot in the wood, so it could never be pulled free, executed by Rome, and then buried by his own family in a proper tomb. Exactly the kind of burial the Gospels describe. Now widen the lens from that one sealed tomb to the city around it, because the setting is part of the story. This is Passover. Jerusalem, which in an ordinary week held perhaps 40,000 people, has swollen several times over with pilgrims who have walked for days to keep the feast. The streets are packed and loud. Smoke rises from the temple, where lambs are being slaughtered by the thousands. Roman soldiers, always most nervous during a festival, watch the crowds from the fortress walls. The whole city is at its most alive on its holiest weekend, and at its edge, behind a stone, one tomb is utterly still. Then, at sundown on Friday, the Sabbath falls, and the law brings the city to rest. No work, no finishing of burials, which is precisely why the women who love him cannot come back to the tomb until dawn on the first day of the week. They have to wait. The middle day is a day of enforced silence, the one day in the entire story when, on the surface, absolutely nothing happens. So the body is accounted for. It is in a specific place, wrapped in linen, packed in spices, sealed behind a stone, and, Matthew alone tells us, guarded by soldiers, because the chief priests remembered that this man had publicly predicted he would rise on the third day, and they feared his followers would steal the corpse and claim it. Notice what that fear accidentally documents. The resurrection prediction was public knowledge before the fact. His enemies took it seriously enough to post a watch. That is the body. But this is a video about what the man himself was doing. And to ask that question, we have to face a word in the title that needs correcting before we go one step further. The title asks what Jesus did in hell. And hell is exactly the wrong word. Or rather, it is a word that has collapsed two things the Bible keeps carefully apart. In English, we use hell for everything, but the New Testament does not. When Peter stands up at Pentecost and quotes the 16th Psalm about the Messiah, the words in your English Standard Version are precise. You will not abandon my soul to Hades. Not hell, Hades. When the risen Christ speaks in Revelation, he says, I have the keys of death and Hades. Again, Hades. That Greek word, Hades, is simply the standard translation of the Hebrew word Sheol, the realm of the dead, the grave, the place where all the dead were understood to go and wait. It is not the same as Gehenna. The word your Bible does translate as hell, the place of final judgment. The older King James Bible blurred the two into one English word, and the confusion has lived in our language ever since. So when the ancient creed says, he descended into hell, the Latin behind it, descendit ad inferos, does not mean the lake of fire. It means the realm of the dead, the place of the dead. And that single correction changes the entire question. We are not asking what Jesus did in a place of torment for the damned. We are asking what he did in the country of the dead, the shadowed waiting place where, according to the whole of the Old Testament, every human being who had ever died was held. Now the question has weight, because if Jesus truly died, truly not in appearance, then his human soul truly went where the dead go. That is the astonishing claim underneath Peter's sermon. He did not hover above death. He entered it. He went in. And to feel the weight of that, step for a moment into the mind of a first-century Jew, because they did not think of death the way we do. We imagine death as a light switched off. They did not. The historian Josephus, writing in this very century, tells us the Pharisees believed firmly that the soul survives the body and passes on to reward or punishment. Death was not the end of the person. It was a passage into the country of the dead, a populated place with gates and keepers where every human being who had ever died was understood to be waiting. When we say he descended, that is the map his first hearers had in their heads. And this is where I want to stop and ask you something directly, because we are about to descend into the hardest and most contested part of this whole story. And I do not want you to descend into it as a spectator. Somewhere in your life, there is very likely a Saturday. Not a day of the week, a season. The catastrophe is over. The crucifixion has already happened. But the resurrection has not come. and God seems to be doing absolutely nothing. You are in the middle, in the silence, waiting with no evidence either way. If you know that place, if you are in that place right now, tell me about it in the comments. Not for show. I read them, and I want to know where your Saturday is, because the claim of this entire story is that the middle day, the silent day, was never the same thing as the absent day. Now, into the dark. The single verse that opens the door, and it is a difficult, disputed door, is in Peter's first letter. He writes that Christ was put to death in the flesh, but made alive in the Spirit, in which he went and proclaimed to the spirits in prison, because they formerly did not obey in the days of Noah. Read that slowly, because almost every word is contested. Who are these spirits in prison? There are two serious answers. One reading says they are the human dead of Noah's generation, the people who drowned in the flood. But the reading, with the deepest roots in the Jewish world, Peter was writing in point somewhere, stranger, to the rebellious angelic beings of Genesis chapter 6, the sons of God, whose story was expanded, in the Jewish literature of the centuries just before Christ, into a great account of fallen watchers bound in a lower prison to await judgment. Peter's own vocabulary and the flood connection, and the echoes in 2 Peter and in Jude, all lean toward this second reading. I will not pretend the matter is settled. It is not, and anyone who tells you it is has stopped reading carefully. But here is what matters more than the identity of the prisoners. And here is where the title's real question, what did he do, finally gets an answer. Look at Peter's verb. He says, Christ went and proclaimed. The Greek word is keriso, to herald, to announce. The word for what a royal herald does. It is not the word for preaching good news and offering a second chance. It is the word for an announcement. And so the oldest and strongest reading of this scene is not that Jesus went down to evangelize the damned or to give the wicked another opportunity. It is that he went as the herald of a conquering king, striding into the enemy's own stronghold to announce a verdict already won, to declare to the very powers that thought death had ended him that the war was over and the outcome was his. Paul says the same thing in a single blazing image in Colossians. On the cross, he writes, God disarmed the rulers and authorities and put them to open shame by triumphing over them. That is a Roman word, a triumph, the parade in which a victorious general drags his defeated enemies through the streets in chains. So the first answer to, what did Jesus do, is this. He made a proclamation, not a plea, a declaration of victory delivered in person, in the one place where his enemies believed they had finally won. Let me be careful and clear, because this is a place people go wrong. This is not a second chance for the damned, and the New Testament nowhere teaches that the wicked get another offer after death. It is an announcement of triumph, not an amnesty for evil. There is a companion verse, just a few lines later in the same letter, that people often lash to this one, where Peter writes that the gospel was preached even to those who are dead. It sounds at first like it settles the matter in favor of a rescue mission, but read carefully, it does not. Many scholars take it to mean believers who heard the gospel while they were alive and have since died. The dead, that is, from our standpoint, not people evangelized in the underworld. I raise it only so you know it is there. The Bible guards this door more jealously than our curiosity would like. But there is a second answer, and it is warmer, and it is the one the Church has loved for 2,000 years. Though we have to handle it with real care, because the moment we move to it, we move from what the Bible says into what faith imagined. Here is the biblical seed. Paul, in Ephesians, quotes an ancient psalm and applies it to Christ. When he ascended on high, he led a host of captives. He led captivity captive. He brought a train of prisoners up and out with him. And who were they? To answer that, you have to understand what first-century Jews believed about the realm of the dead, because by the time of Jesus, they no longer pictured Sheol as one flat, silent, undivided pit. In one of Jesus' own parables, the story of the rich man and Lazarus, the realm of the dead already has regions, a place of torment and a place of comfort at Abraham's side, with a great fixed chasm between them. Now, that is a parable, and we should not turn a parable into a map of the afterlife. But it reflects the world of the hearers. The righteous dead of the Old Covenant, Abraham, the prophets, the faithful who died in hope before the Messiah came, were understood to be waiting, not yet in glory, waiting. And there is one more voice from that Friday that belongs here. As Jesus was dying, one of the criminals crucified beside him turned to him in faith. And Jesus answered, "Truly, I say to you, today you will be with me in paradise." That single line carries a puzzle worth keeping honest about. The oldest manuscripts had no punctuation. So where you set the comma, "I say to you today," or "today you will be with me," quietly changes the timing. And paradise is not obviously the same place as the realm of the dead. The tradition even gave the man a name, Dismas, though the Bible never does. But strip the puzzles away, and one thing stands unmoved. The dying Christ spoke to a dying man as one who already held authority over where the dead go, as though the keys were already on his belt. And the liberation reading braids these threads into a single golden chain. The righteous dead were waiting. The descending king led captives out, and the first visible sign of it broke the surface of the world. Because Matthew records two strange signs at the moment of death. The first was in the temple, the great curtain that screened the Holy of Holies, the veil that walled off the presence of God from every human being, was torn in two, from top to bottom. From top to bottom, not ripped by human hands from below, but opened from above. God's own gesture, the barrier between heaven and humanity torn open at the very hour the barrier between the living and the dead was being broken beneath the earth. And the second sign, the tombs also were opened, and many bodies of the saints who had fallen asleep were raised. Hold on to the timing, because it is easy to misread. Matthew says they came out of the tombs after his resurrection. This is not a scene from inside the 3 days. It is the aftermath, the first fruits of the victory spilling up into the visible city once the resurrection had happened. The waiting was over. The chain was broken, and the prophet Zechariah, 5 centuries earlier, had spoken the exact act in a single line that is the most on-target prophecy in this whole story. As for you also, because of the blood of my covenant with you, I will set your prisoners free from the waterless pit. Prisoners, set free from the pit, free. Read looking backward, it reads like a caption. This is the scene the church spent centuries painting and singing into the great picture we call the harrowing of hell. And I have to be straight with you about where it comes from. The vivid, cinematic version, with dialogue and death personified in terror and a fixed sequence of events, is not in the Bible. It comes mainly from the Gospel of Nicodemus, a Christian work written some 4 or 5 centuries after the events, not eyewitness testimony and not scripture. So what follows is not history. It is what faith imagined, a picture the church drew to express a truth the eye could not see. And what a picture it is. Imagine, first, the dark itself, the long, thick silence of a place where the faithful dead had been waiting not for hours but for centuries. Abraham, who had died 2,000 years before. Moses, David, the prophets who had spoken of a deliverer and then closed their eyes without seeing him. Generation after generation, held in the shadowed hush, the hope worn thin, and then, into that ancient stillness, something the dead had never known, a sound approaching from outside. Imagine the gates of the realm of the dead, the gates of bronze and bars of iron that the Psalms speak of shattering. The tradition pictures them torn from their hinges as a great light floods a place that had never known light. It pictures the personified figures of death and the grave recoiling in panic as a voice outside demands that the ancient doors be lifted. The very words of the 24th Psalm. Lift up your heads, O gates, that the King of glory may come in. It pictures Christ walking through the hall to where the patriarchs wait, and taking the first man, Adam, by the hand, and leading him out into a morning the dead had stopped believing would ever come. Death itself, the tradition says, is bound in its own prison, which is a picture of a claim the Bible does make plainly in Hebrews, that through his death, Christ destroyed the one who has the power of death, that is, the devil, and freed those who all their lives had been held in slavery by the fear of dying. The staging is imagined, but strip away the medieval scenery, and the core the Bible actually confesses still stands, unshaken. Christ entered the domain of the dead not as its newest prisoner, but as its conqueror. Now, I owe you honesty about a third way of reading all of this, because not every serious Christian reads the descent as a literal journey at all, and I would be misleading you if I sold you only the dramatic version. There is a long and respected tradition associated especially with the reformer John Calvin that reads, "He descended into hell, not as a trip to an underworld, but as a way of naming something that happened on the cross itself. The unfathomable depth of Christ's suffering, the anguish of a sinless man bearing the full weight of judgment, the God-forsakenness of the cry, 'Why have you forsaken me?' On this reading, the descent is the descent into that abyss of spiritual dereliction, not a geography. It is a sober and powerful reading, and it guards something precious, that the worst of what Christ endured, he endured for us, in the flesh, in the daylight. I will not tell you which of these three is the winner, because the honest answer is that faithful Christians have held all three, and the New Testament does not hand us a settled verdict. What all three agree on, the proclamation of victory, the leading out of the captives, the depth of suffering borne, is the one thing that matters most. Whatever exactly happened in that hidden interval, its outcome was triumph, not defeat. And then came the third day. The Gospels do not describe the moment of resurrection itself. No human eye saw it happen. What they describe is the discovery. Early on the first day of the week, while it was still dark, women who had watched him die came to finish the burial rites that the Sabbath had interrupted.
Come, look where he was lying.
And here we should pause on the arithmetic that troubles so many people, because it is worth answering rather than dodging. Jesus had said he would be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth, and yet Friday afternoon to Sunday dawn is not 72 hours. The answer is simple once you know how Jews of that time counted. Any part of a day was reckoned as a whole day. Friday, a piece of it. Saturday, all of it. Sunday, before dawn. 3 days by their reckoning, exactly as promised. It is not a contradiction. It is a calendar you were never taught. The women came, and the stone was rolled away, and the tomb was empty, and the linen wrappings lay where the body had been, and the cloth that had covered his face was folded by itself. The guards, Matthew says, had become like dead men. And in the days that followed, the sightings began. First the women, then the disciples. Then, Paul says, more than 500 at once. One careful note belongs here. The longest ending of Mark's Gospel, the passage that carries several of the most dramatic post-resurrection sayings, is absent from the oldest and most reliable manuscripts we possess, and most scholars regard it as a later addition. We build this story on ground that is solid. But the deepest testimony to what those 3 days accomplished is not a scene at all. It is a single sentence spoken by the risen Christ, and it is the answer to everything we have been asking. He says, "I died, and behold, I am alive forevermore, and I have the keys of death and Hades." Keys. In the ancient world, keys meant authority, the right to open and to shut, to bind and to release. Whoever holds the keys of a prison holds the prison, and the risen Jesus declares that he now holds the keys of the very realm he entered as a dead man. He went in as a captive of death, and he came out holding death's own keys on his belt. That is the whole story in one image. That is what he did. And the prophets had heard the sound of it coming from centuries away. Hosea, 700 years before, had put a taunt in the mouth of God against the grave itself. "Shall I ransom them from the power of Sheol? Shall I redeem them from death? O death, where are your plagues? O Sheol, where is your sting?"
Where is thy sting?
Paul reached back
grave,
and seized that
where is thy
exact
victory?
line to sing over the empty tomb. "O death, where is your victory? O death, where is your sting?" The mockery that Hosea aimed at death in the dark, Paul flung at it in the light of Easter, because now it had actually happened. The thing the prophets could only long for, the tomb made real. There is a reason this matters more than a historical curiosity, and it comes back to your Saturday. Because most of us do not actually live on Friday or Sunday. Friday is catastrophe, and Sunday is vindication, and both of them are loud and clear. But most of life is lived on Saturday. The long, silent middle after the worst has happened, and before the rescue has come. When God appears to be doing nothing at all, and the tomb is sealed, and the city is keeping its ordinary feast as though the world had not ended. The unbearable thing about Saturday is not the pain. It is the silence. It is the absence of evidence. It is not knowing whether anything is happening at all. And the entire claim of these 3 days, spoken to you across 2,000 years, is this. On the one Saturday when God seemed most silent, most absent, most defeated, a corpse in a borrowed grave, a stone, a Roman seal, that was the very moment the decisive work was being done. Unseen, underneath, in the dark. The stillness of that middle day was not God doing nothing. It was God doing everything where no one could watch. So if you are in your Saturday tonight, I cannot tell you it is Sunday yet. But I can tell you what the empty tomb tells you. That the God who works in sealed and silent places has done his deepest work in exactly the kind of dark you are standing in. He has been in the country of the dead. He knows the way out, and he came back holding the keys. If this story has given you something to hold on to in your own middle day, then do the one thing that costs you nothing and might carry someone else through their Saturday. Share it with the person in your life who you know is sitting in the silence right now. And if you want to keep walking back through the first century with us, into the rooms and roads and hours where these events actually happened, subscribe and stay. There is far more of this story to tell. I will leave you with the question I keep returning to, and I would like your answer below. We have spent this whole video in the space between death and resurrection. So here is what I want to know. If you could ask the risen Christ one question about those 3 days,
Do you know the truth?
the one thing you most wish the Gospels had told us, what would you ask him? Tell me. I will be reading.